Thanks for spending a few minutes with me today. This is Fiscal Therapy, where we have real conversations for thoughtful financial decisions. I'm Travis Flandermeyer with Lakeridge Wealth Management. Each episode is a calm, honest conversation about money, planning, and the decisions that shape our lives. Today I'm joined by Connie Lee, CFA, CFP, and 20-plus year veteran of the investment management business. So Connie, when people hear 529 plan, what do they usually think it is, and where might they have some misconceptions?
I think when people hear 529 plan, people think specifically about college, and they think college account, college savings account. But what I think that they don't realize is that it's not just about college. I'd just say it's more about education, and that there are tax advantages to the account. So much like a retirement account, there's a Roth IRA where you contribute money and the earnings grow tax deferred and you withdraw it tax free. The 529 plan operates very similarly. You put contributions in, the earnings are tax deferred. And if you use those funds for education purposes, which there's an expanded list, which we can talk to, but when you take those contributions out, it's tax-free. So starting early and contributing to this account, you have compounding earnings over time, which can amount to significant funds for education, not just college.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also a question I get a lot of times is about like the different state plans. So I may be talking to somebody in Colorado or Missouri, and they'll have a question, well, do I have to use my state's plan? What plays into that? Because, New Mexico every state has their own plan, or even sometimes a couple of plans. So what can you comment on the various states' plans?
I'd say that it falls into 3 different categories, and I have a cheat sheet to make sure that I get this right. But there are states that are kind of neutral, that say you can use whatever state's plan that you want to use. And so if a state is tax neutral, then it becomes more about picking a plan that has maybe the right fit of investment choices. Maybe you're a do-it-yourself investor and you want a full spectrum of investment options. Perhaps there's a 529 plan that offers the options that you're looking for. Or maybe you want a more constrained list of investment options, and there are plans that maybe offer a more limited list. Excuse me. And maybe that's okay for you. So those are tax-neutral states. There are states that offer tax parity. So that's where your state will offer you tax benefits for using another state's plan, in which case, again, you can kind of shop around for a 529 plan that maybe meets your needs, has low fees, performance has been good. So those are some other things that you might want to look for. And then lastly, there are states that do offer benefits for using their state's plan. So New Mexico is one of them. We offer a 529 plan. Our residents who use the plan get a state tax deduction. So your contributions to the 529 plan reduce your taxable income, which reduces your taxes. So I think it's important to know the state that you're living in, what tax benefits there are. If there are state tax benefits, I think it's beneficial to at least consider using your own state's plan. If there are no state tax benefits, then perhaps you could look at using a different state's plan, but recognizing kind of what the investment options are, what the fees are, and what performance has been.
Yeah, and I'd add to that it doesn't necessarily it's not the same answer for anyone.
Sure.
And it's very dependent on what state they're in. And then you referenced a moment ago Roth IRAs. And, I would add that because some states offer state tax benefits on their contributions, the 529 plan can actually be even more beneficial than a Roth IRA in those states, because you get that state tax deduction, perhaps, and then you get the tax deferred growth, and then if used for education, the tax free withdrawals. Mm-hmm. So, saving for college is, I think, lot of people come to me with very different opinions on saving for college. And I think it's interesting. Some people have passions behind fully funding. Some people have passions about not funding at all. Do you experience the same thing?
Yeah, I think our own personal experiences or backgrounds with how we went through college, if we went through college, kind of shape our views about saving for education for our children. And people have very, very strong views about it. And so, yeah, I think it's a very personal discussion. I think there's no right or wrong answer. So I think it's definitely a conversation that we have about what the goals are and how that fits into someone's overall financial plan.
Yeah. I'm definitely a big proponent, and it's certainly my opinion that it's no one size fits all, and it, whatever meets somebody's financial plan is the right answer. But that right answer is unique for everyone. Sometimes funding college can be a stressor for people. Why do you think, what contributes to that stress in your experience?
Yeah, I think there's a practical answer, and then I think there's a deeper answer. And I think the practical answer for what causes so much stress is the cost of college. I think there's no question that it's extremely expensive. College costs inflate higher than normal inflation. So I think college education costs are somewhere between 4 to 6%, and average inflation is 2.5%, 3%, I'd say. So college costs are rising. So the sticker shock is definitely a major stressor. And then I think the next layer on that is pressure that perhaps parents put on ourselves because we have an expectation of what experience or goals we have for our own children. So I think a lot of that is our own pressure that we put on ourselves that cause stress. So either it's, guilt, are we doing enough for our kids, or not enough for our kids, or maybe I want to put my own retirement aside to give them the college experience that I didn't have, or what have you. So there's all sorts of pressures, sticker shock, which is very practical, and then there's a whole other emotional side that I think causes a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I like that. Saving for college versus other priorities. So to build on that kind of pressure and that internal debate, should I save for college? Should I save for retirement? Thoughts on that?
I think that's also very personal. I think that there are some schools of thought or, some views that people are willing to put their retirement aside because education is a priority, which I think that's okay. But I think it's important in our roles to explain what those trade-offs might be in terms of either does that look like you're working an extra 5 years because you want to achieve this goal, or you're delaying retirement, or you're spending less now to achieve those goals. So I think it's important to understand what those trade-offs are. At the risk of sounding a little bit selfish, I tend to operate under airplane rules. So I put my oxygen mask on first. And if I'm taking care of myself first, then I can take care of my kids. And so for me, and I think many others, it's important to prioritize my own retirement. I think a common phrase is that there's loans for education, but there's not loans for retirement. And while, I think we don't want to go to extremes into student debt because that causes a lot of other issues, but I think it's an option, which there's not that option for retirement. And so I think one, again, understanding the trade-offs, but not losing focus of your own goals and retirement time horizon is important.
So let's build on that then. So for the person who's then comparing or debating where they should put that money, how should they go about determining how much to put into a 529 plan?
Yeah, I think these are very complicated questions. And so I think, once we've built a financial plan and understood, how much it's going to take for you to get to the retirement that you want, then I think we can look at well, what other goals are there to achieve? And so we can see how much that means to college or what that goal for college is, whether it's, maybe your goal is to fund 50% of your child's education, maybe it's 70%. So there are all sorts of calculators we can use to calculate what that looks like. But again, always tying it back to how does that fit into your current budget or your financial plan, I think is important.
Yeah. So I'd say then for the person who's having that debate, if they're listening to this, then certainly asking their advisor to factor it into their overall financial plan, because the answer is going to be different depending on what their priorities are.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So in that case, then let's take it to the next step, and maybe a best case scenario. You have too much money in the 529 plan. Maybe scholarships occurred, or you went to a cheaper school. What are some options for somebody who then maybe has too much money in their 529?
I think it's a great problem to have. Either your kid got scholarships or decided maybe you were planning on private school and they ended up going to public school. I think the risk of overfunding is low. And what's nice about the 529 plan is that there are options. And then over the last year, there have been expanded options. So you can change the beneficiary of the 529 plan. So maybe your child's sibling perhaps needs some extra help for expenses. You could always change the beneficiary so the sibling could use the 529 plan funds. Niece, nephew, anyone in the family tree who's a qualified beneficiary can use the 529 plan assets. Grad school is an option too. If your child wants to continue their education and pursue another degree or an advanced degree, 529 plans can be used for that. If you're fortunate enough and you know that you have enough funds for college, maybe your child is attending a private school K through 12. Last year, it was expanded where K through 12 education qualifies up to a certain limit, but qualifies for 529 plan expenses. So you could actually start using those funds sooner than you had intended. Student loan repayment is actually an eligible expense too. So if your child took out a student loan, there's a lifetime limit of $10,000 where you could use 529 plans to repay a student loan. So getting back to the point of there's loans for education, while 529 plans can also help pay for those loans should you need it. So that's an option as well. And then I'd say the worst case scenario is you need to withdraw the funds, that you don't have a qualified expense, you withdraw the funds. You would not pay taxes on the contributions. You've already paid taxes on those contributions. You would just pay taxes on the earnings, as well as a penalty for not using it for qualified expenses. So those are some options. I would add one more actually. One of the newer ones is being able to roll up to $35,000 into a Roth IRA. So there are some rules and nuances with that. For example, your 529 plan has to be open for at least 15 years. So the sooner you start contributing to a 529 plan, the clock can get going sooner on that. You're limited in how much you can roll over each year into the IRA, but that can help jumpstart retirement for your children as well.
Yeah, and that's huge. It also, I think, in that scenario, shows the child how to prioritize savings and how, jumpstarting retirement is a really key factor for a young professional who maybe has just graduated from college now. The other thing I think is interesting on other ways that it can be used is certain continuing ed and professional certifications can now also qualify for it. So if there is an overfunded 529 plan, all is certainly not lost. It's not a bad scenario to be in. A lot of options these days.
That's right. So in that scenario, one person that I failed to mention that you could use the 529 plan for is yourself. So you can change the beneficiary to yourself. Personally, as a career changer, I went through the CFP program and did the education coursework. I could have used 529 plan funding for that CFP education coursework. So, we think about 529 plans for our children, but if they don't use it, you can use it too. Absolutely.
Yeah. What would you say if there was a rule about 529 plans that people don't necessarily understand or underappreciate, anything come to mind on that?
I feel like I spoiled it by just mentioning it, but I was going to mention just being a career changer. So using it to pursue education for a new field or a new degree that you're going to be in. So again, using the 529 plan for yourself to achieve other goals. I sometimes think too that with the 529 plan, our goal is often to get to the start of college and be done. But really, you can continue contributing to the 529 plan throughout college, and that can help you as well. With the states that have the state tax deduction, with New Mexico, for example, there isn't a limit on or a timing restriction on how long the funds have to stay in the 529 plan for. So if you're paying current expenses, it could be worthwhile to use the 529 plan as a vehicle to get that state tax deduction and pay for education as you're going along. So even though you're not using it for growth, you can still benefit today by putting contributions into the 529 plan and using it for expenses that are happening today.
Yeah. And I'll add one of my favorite features of the 529 is the fact, this is kind of building on what you were saying, is the fact, though, that it's completely controlled by the owner of the 529 plan. So that gives you the ability to turn around and use it for yourself as the beneficiary. But sometimes we'll have people asking about, grandparents come to mind in particular ways to benefit their grandkids. And an account like a UTMA might fit the bill or might often come to mind first. But there are certain types of an account where it becomes the child's account once they hit the age of majority. Building on what you said, a key distinction with 529 plans is that it's continues to be maintained and controlled by the person who sets it up. So those who set the 529 plan up kind of retain more control of it, and they can change from one grandkid to the next, or use the funds for anything that they might need. So I personally like that control of it also.
Mm-hmm.
So, alrighty. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.